So we covered actually quite a bit in our last session, and what we're going to be kind of covering in this session today is just kind of tying up some loose ends, making sure we get everything else finished. It probably won't take nearly as long as we took last time. That was a bit longer than I normally prefer, but you know, we were just kind of going with the flow, and we got as much done as we could. So what we covered, if you don't mind, I'm going to go ahead and do some clicking on your screen here.
Sure.
So what we did is we covered the repeat dialog menu. I think you feel well. We better drop a pattern in so we can kind of show that.
Are
Okay.
you doing it finger?
I'm using a mouse.
Oh, see, that was yeah. I could hook a mouse to this, couldn't I?
You probably could, yeah. Shouldn't have any trouble with it. Just plug it into one of the USB ports.
That was another question I had because if I tried to do that with my finger, I just had them all over the place.
So
Really?
yeah, I mean it should work just fine. The cursor should pop up and everything for you. I'm actually on a computer myself, but I'm pretty sure the Android tablet will support a mouse if you have one to plug in that's a USB mouse.
Okay, go ahead.
But here's kind of where we're at here. So you remember the repeat menu? You know, you understand what the repeat row does here for both horizontal and vertical. You understand what spacing does, I think. Did we cover, do you remember spacing? How that went? And we also have, of course, offset, which is about every other row offsetting a little bit on that left margin. And,
Right.
and you understand what autofill is. Pretty sure
Right.
we covered everything in the move menu. And we've covered rotate, which I saw you using pretty well, so that obviously made some good sense. Um, Obviously, the main difference on this screen is just knowing how to lock and unlock proportions, and then knowing that you can knowing what the difference is between smart scale and this morph. The morph is what you want if you want it to stretch it out a little bit, and kind of
What
fit.
is?
This morph icon, do you see how it's highlighted white right now?
Uh-huh.
That button will stretch the pattern out and make sure it fills all the space available. So
Okay, let's stretch pattern. I couldn't remember for sure what the... Well, there's one great advantage of this over the Qbot. If I do go through here and put some, I can see what it's going to look like, So,
yeah,
it's like with the Qbot, I was kind of like, well, I hope that's what I want. So, and this stretches the pattern to fill the space, correct?
right. And so the smart scale does the same thing, except it only works with like 90-degree angle pattern boxes. Morph, if you've got like a pattern box that's square shaped but it's kind of skewed in some way, it'll still stretch the pattern out to fill that as much as possible.
And you were calling something morph?
Yeah, that's this one right here that I'm highlighting white there. Did you see that? This one
Oh,
right here is
that's
morph.
cool.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay.
So you understand the scale menu. Remember mirror horizontally and vertically. Those are pretty straightforward.
Right.
You know how to add pattern, remove pattern. You understand what this next arrow does. It's cycling through all the available patterns. You know,
This one here?
yeah, that's the one.
Okay.
We've got the save feature, which is pretty straightforward. How you save patterns on the screen. Crop, you understood. Merge is pretty straightforward as well. And swapping the start and stop points. And undo and redo.
Merge was when you put two patterns together, right?
That's exactly right.
Two patterns together. Okay.
So this was the meat of like everything we did. This was the main portion of everything we did, and we touched on layout as well. Now do you kind of understand? Do you feel like you have a decent understanding of what a layout is?
No, I'm assuming it's what. Well, no, not really.
That's okay. So a layout is all of your pattern boxes. So we have two of two here. It's the dimension of those pattern boxes, and it's all the patterns that you've loaded into the pattern boxes.
Okay.
So it's everything you've designed on the screen itself. You can save that, and that collectively is known as a layout.
Okay. What would you use that for? I mean, what would be the purpose of that?
Great question. So let's say I've got a quilt top and it's on my I've got it loaded on my frame, and I've isolated like 9 or 10 different quilt blocks, and I'm able to stitch through half of them or whatnot, and I just decide that I'm not going to do the next 8 or 9 quilt blocks or whatever. I'm not going to do the remaining half of my project until like 3 or 4 days later. But I don't want to leave.
In order to keep from having to go back and put everything in, you can save it.
Exactly. Instead of leaving your tablet on, you save it, so you save all the work you've done, and then you can load that layout back up.
And load layout. And you do that with this here?
That's right.
Okay. You can save your work, load, and save layout.
Yep.
Okay. Come back to.
And so that's what this save button does right here on the right. It's how you save everything you've done. I think you're familiar with adding a pattern box and removing a pattern box and adjusting.
Mm-hmm.
And this last bottom icon is just reset your quilt area, which you probably won't ever really need to use, but it's there. Remember we talked about last time, the only reason you'd really need to do that is if the bunching up quilt on your take-up roller made it so that fabric that was building up on the roller prevented you from going all the way to the top of your original quilt area. Do you remember that?
Right, yeah, we did.
That's the most common reason for it. There might be a few others, but that's really the most common use for it. And then oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just going back to the wrench. I forgot the wrench. That's the wrench and the plus button both kind of do the same thing, right? They set the pattern boxes.
More or less, but the thing is you just hit the wrench icon, so now you have to retrace out this pattern box. So what it does is whatever pattern box you're currently looking at, it lets you redraw out those dimensions. So we're going to need to hurry and draw out a quick...
That's not necessarily creating a new pattern box. That's kind of changing the one you already have.
That's correct. So we're going to have to redraw out the one we just had selected, because it's gone now. So let's hurry up and we'll just draw a quick rectangle here.
Okay. I can do that.
You're almost a pro.
That I can do. Okay, we're back.
Perfect. Okay. So that's kind of what this screen does. So I mean that's how layout works. Any questions on layout? Do you feel like you kind of have a basic grasp of how that works?
The more I use it, the better I'll get.
There you go. And the last thing we covered was in the home menu. We went over several of these. So we've got the green go button, obviously, the red stop button. You know what this highlighted needle does, right?
Horizontal, vertical, and diagonal lock.
Right, that's correct. So we've got the horizontal lock, vertical lock, and the diagonal lock. And this last one right here is what we're going to cover today. It's a nest feature.
The diagonal lock, you have to set a number, right?
That's correct.
You can't just... Because I was showing that to someone, and I thought, well, it's not doing anything, but I have to set it at the angle. I have to set the angle.
That's right. So now it's at a 2-degree slant.
2 degrees what?
It's at a 2-degree angle right now.
Which is not enough to tell, really.
Well, not unless you go if you go all the way to the left, you could tell, but yeah, it's not very much.
Okay, well, let me just for me to see it. Let's go 9, and then go all the way over to the I'm gonna hit the check mark. So 9. Oh yeah, I see it now. It's only okay. Great, that's awesome.
And that can be useful for like cross hatching and so forth. That's kind of the concept there, but really, just get creative with it.
Okay, gotcha. All right, now we're nesting.
Okay, so I'm actually going to save nesting to be the last thing. We're going to cover some easier things to handle first, and then we'll jump straight to nesting.
Okay.
I don't think we mentioned free motion at all. So
Yeah.
this right here we can see is free motion. We've got a little camcorder icon on this lime green screen, and you can see there's two buttons on the right. It's pretty basic layout and it's a pretty basic interface here, but how it works is this allows you to trace and record patterns, and then they'll be added to your system as a pattern that you could tell the robot to stitch out.
Okay.
So if I hit this, I'm gonna go ahead and hit this power button for you, and I want you to just do like a loop. Just do a loop with your quilt machine real quick.
Oh, okay.
Perfect. That looks great. And since let's just assume, obviously that's not exactly what we want, but we're gonna hit the power button one more time to turn it off. And it gives us a little preview and says, "Hey, this is the pattern that you could save to the system to be used and quilted out by Butler, if you want." And do you want to use this? Is what it's going to ask you basically. So I mean, we looks like we had a little bit of trouble there on the left. We weren't quite sure what we were going to do. I'm going to hit the power button one more time and just do like I don't know, like a loop, like any kind of loop or squiggle line or something. One more time just to demonstrate what happens. So try and move your machine a bit. Perfect. Perfect. Okay. All right, I'll hit that power button again, and let's just assume this is much better. We think this is the right one we'd want to use. Then we'll come down here and notice that what happened was when I hit power again, it automatically deleted the one that was up there before. Right? Just wiped it out. It started fresh. You hit this save button down here, and you can go ahead and let's just punch in test. Hit the green check. And now if you go to the edit menu and hit add pattern, scroll all the way to the bottom for me and hit test.
Yeah, that's neat.
So some obvious uses for this. I mean, not everyone's a free motion quilter, but if you have a free motion quilter who visits and they've got a neat design they want to show you or whatnot, you can actually record what they're doing, so you'll be able to use that in the future. Another great application of this is a lot of people have pantograph patterns that they normally would have to trace with like a laser pointer or something similar. But when you have this record function, you can actually trace them out yourself with the record feature active, or portions of them. Maybe you don't want to do the whole thing, and then you have them available to be used.
Okay.
So,
Okay.
and you may have to trace it several times, of course. I mean, because it will capture every movement you make, and sometimes we have, a little unsteady hand or we make a mistake, but it's there for you. Another popular use of it though is just to trace it out one time, then you just upload it into a pattern editing software like we have Quilt Manager, and you'll just kind of clean up the pattern there. So, anyways, just some applications of free motion. But does that kind of make sense and how that's used?
I've got that. I understood that. Yeah.
Perfect. Okay. So we've kind of touched on that. Another thing I wanted to touch on was just here in the settings menu. Now,
Okay.
there's a lot of information back here that you really won't need to know unless someone contacts you like me if you're having trouble and you need some tech support and help. This is where a lot of times where we'll end up if we're in that kind of situation. But just so you're aware, a few key things you'll want to pay attention to. We have here this big button. You can see there's several tabs. We got the updates, parameters, constants, advanced, test, and configuration. And it defaults to this updates tab. This button right here, big system info. If we click that, it tells us what our current software versions are. So we know what our display version's at. We know what our robot's at. We know what our machine's at. And this big check for update button is going to be pretty popular. So if you want to go ahead and press that right now, it'll see how that text appeared right there.
Check for updates.
Say that one more time.
And how often should I check back for updates?
I mean, you could check every couple months. Should be sufficient.
Okay.
And it's not like the end of the world if you don't get updates. It's just if you want to see what the latest and greatest is that we have to offer, this is the way you can get access to it easily. So no more having to download a file and get it on a USB drive and then take it to the machine and then go through this process. You just press the button, check for update, and then there'll be an option to install it if you want.
Okay.
So then let's hit the green check mark button. So the next place, let's go to the parameters tab. So right here, you can see we've got max speed and min speed. Now, you really don't need to touch those, and I'm not going to go into them too much. There's not really a need for you to adjust max or min speed unless someone instructs you to. But the lock speed here, we have, not lock speed, excuse me, the lock menu. This is how you set the number of lock stitches that are done whenever Butler performs a tie-off stitch for you. So for example, right now it's set to do 3 lock stitches at the beginning and end of every pattern, right? So if you preferred to have more or less, this lock menu is where you would adjust that. And I'm not saying you want 7 lock stitches. 3 is probably preferred, but that's where it's tucked away.
And isn't there another place that gets changed? Maybe in.
I'm sorry, you cut out there. Where else do you think it gets changed?
I was thinking I was able to change that in the Stitch Perfect area.
Yes.
Maybe not.
Yes, I think you can, and it's well, it's not this exact. Well, yes, you can, but it's actually 2 different settings. I mean, they're doing the exact same thing, but it's 2 different things, if that makes sense. There's 2 places that command the same type of operation, but this is when the robotics tells it to do it, and the perfect stitch side is when you tell the machine to do it. Does that make sense?
Better if the robotics do it.
There you go. There you go.
Stitching robotics, okay.
And then let's go next to constants. Okay, so here there's a few things that a lot of this you don't need to pay attention to be honest. But the one of the important ones you'd want to look at is right here where it says jump stitch. So jump stitch, what jump stitch does is it allows you to set how far you'll allow the machine to just continue stitching itself. How long of a jump stitch will you allow it to do without it automatically performing a tie-off stitch and asking you to cut the thread? Does that make sense? So like, let's say I get to the end of one of my patterns, and let's say there's an 8-inch jump between pattern number 1 that I'm going to stitch out and pattern number 2. So if I had set this jump stitch to a value of 9, then any gap that is 9 inches or less, then the robot will not do a tie-off stitch. It'll just automatically go to the start of the next pattern, and it'll drag that big long string across the top of your quilt, and then it'll do the tie-off at the beginning of that pattern and go ahead and stitch it as normal.
So that's in inches, not stitches.
Yes, good question. Yeah, it's in inches.
In inches, not stitches.
Okay. So that's kind of how that works. It defaults to be 0, which means it's going to always ask you. It's always going to ask you to do a tie-off stitch at the end of every pattern, no matter the distance. But here's how you can kind of customize that. If you'd rather just do a jump stitch of like a couple inches, you can set that right here in the jump stitch setting.
Well, I guess if I'm using that sort of pattern thing, I'll always go back to it. Okay.
Yeah. The rest of these, I wouldn't advise you to change. There's no real need for you to. So yeah.
Better that I don't.
All right, let's go to the Advanced tab, unless you have more questions.
Good.
Okay. And so here, a few things should look fairly familiar. So obviously we've got machine type, and again, a lot of this you don't need to change as well, but there's a few things you can do. And the important thing here is just the Ask Quilt-ez button. Do you see that button?
You mean to activate it? Oh, okay.
So now what this does, and we haven't set up, I don't know if you've set up Gmail. Do you have Gmail for your email service?
I do.
Perfect. Let's go ahead and hit Gmail real quick. And you have an existing account, so go ahead and hit existing. And then you're going to type in your email here. And just make sure we get it all exactly correct.
I don't remember. My husband set it up, and I do not remember what he used. I don't know what the password is. I'll have to go get my book.
Well, if it's nearby, I can wait. It's up to you.
Yep. The next room. I'll be right back.
Okay.
And I really hope he wrote it down like I asked him to. I think he was going to use its password is okay. Done.
Okay. So this is just where it's going to be syncing your Gmail to the tablet here.
Okay. Got it. Keep this tablet backed up with my Google account. Okay. Just hit the arrow or...
Yeah, hit that big arrow in the bottom right. And so what we just did is we set up your email. It's going to sync for a little while here. But that Ask Quilt-ez button, what it does is it sets up an email to send to us here. And it's got a copy of your layout, which is, again, all your patterns and pattern boxes. And it's kind of used as a way to troubleshoot. So if you run into a problem, you don't know what happened, you can send us your pattern files and explain kind of what has happened. So why don't you go ahead and do that, where it says do not remove text above your... Can you see your cursor's flashing right there?
What do you want me to do?
I want you to press on where that cursor is flashing at the bottom of the screen.
Okay.
And I want you to type in some test text here. So this is just put like, this is a test. But what you would really type here is whatever problem you've been running into, kind of describing what happened, what you did before, what happened after. You know, if you run into any bugs. So for example, that clam situation you ran into might have been something you'd want to send to us and see if we can explore a little bit. Does that make sense?
And then just hit send.
Exactly. Go ahead and hit send. And then from here, let's go ahead and hit that robot icon in the top right. Well,
Sorry, me back spinning, didn't it?
looks like it restarted everything.
Wonder why.
Me too. I'm not really sure, to be honest.
Expert.
Well, you know, I've got that on camera, so I'll go show it to my engineers and ask them what happened.
Well, I did. I think what you told me. So
You did exactly what you did exactly what you should have done. You didn't do anything wrong. Okay, so let's just set another quilt area here real quick. Okay.
you want me to hang on my? You want me to go ahead and do another pattern box?
Yeah, if you could, just a horizontal pattern box here.
Okay. All right.
Okay, so from here, what we're going to do is we're going to kind of test. From here, we're going to go into the nest feature. Okay. So what we did is we went through all the settings, we've covered everything else. It's time that we figure out how this nest thing works. So before we nest, we need to actually add a pattern in. So let's go to the Edit menu, and let's add a continuous pattern of some kind.
Yeah, and then at some point, not today, but maybe I'll call back and we set up something. I need to know how to do corners,
Okay.
but not today.
Okay.
Let's see here. Let's do something easy. It's not gonna. That's an easy one.
Let's do that one, yeah.
Okay.
So, and then let's go to the repeat menu and repeat that about 3 or 4 times. Or just hit autofill. That's perfect.
Do you want me to stitch it?
We're not going to stitch it, no. We're going to do it without stitching.
Okay, great.
And so, what I want you to do is go to the home menu. And also, I want you down at the bottom left. Do you see where it has that grid of 9 orange boxes? And just to the right of it, there's a grid of 9 boxes with only one that's solid. I want you to press that icon if you can. Perfect. So now we're just looking at the pattern box. Before we were looking at the bird's eye view of everything.
So can I do this again? Let me see the difference of what I'm looking at. Oh, it won't look at it. Okay, so that's everything.
Mm-hmm.
Then I go here. Got it.
So now, so this part's going to be kind of tricky. I'd like to actually, you have fabric on the frame, correct?
Yes.
Okay. Let me explain what I want to do, and let me tell you if it's something that you can do or not. I want to actually, at some point here, we're going to roll the quilt. Not right now, but is it okay if we roll the quilt?
Sure.
Okay, great. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to do a dry run of this. We're not going to actually stitch anything, but we're just going to kind of demonstrate how this whole nesting process works. So the nesting feature is used most when the pattern that you're going to stitch is it goes across, it goes over like the end of your quilt frame. So it's like an area where you naturally have to advance the quilt in order to stitch it properly and nest it properly. So, and this isn't going to be, because this is a smaller pattern box and way it's positioned in the quilt area, it's not the perfect example, but I think it'll illustrate the concept well enough that you'll understand kind of how this works. So what we're going to... Sorry, go ahead.
You can make the pattern box edge to edge of the quilt. This was just in the middle where the little bear is. But I can make it edge to edge if you want.
You know, I don't think we need to. I think it's going to make some sense to you.
Okay.
I mean, you can tell me I told you so if I'm wrong, but I think we're gonna be okay.
You're back. You're back. Unfortunately, and of course this was because I had the Q-bot. Most of my quilting was with Q-bot edge to edge. And what I would do is draw a template and kind of nest it up and guess and hope that I got it right. So I understand what nesting is. But I want to get away from it with all these other features that we have. You know, I've got a quilt that has blocks like the one I'm working on now. I want to do individual blocks. But I do need, because there is some quilts that just call for edge to edge.
Yep. Exactly, yeah. So then let me kind of get you familiar with this particular, how this nesting feature works. So let's assume that what we're looking at is, let's assume it's already been stitched out, okay? And what we're going to do to get started, so let's assume we want to nest the exact same pattern underneath the one that we've already stitched. So we've already got these 3 leaves stitched out.
Okay.
So to nest the same pattern set underneath the one that we've already stitched, we're going to go ahead and press the nesting icon. And there's the first thing here, you see the dialog on the left. It says select and mark nesting point 1. Now what does that mean? Well, so, nesting point one is basically going to be like the lowest point on the pattern that we can see here. Okay. So
Point
so we're gonna go.
is,
Yeah, we're gonna go all the way to the left.
well, but let me just make a definition of it. Nesting point one is the lowest point of what? The previous line
On the pattern itself.
of pattern. Okay. Lowest point of pattern. Okay, so for this instance, it would be
We're gonna go on that leftmost leaf,
right there.
and right where it lines up with that yellow edge of our pattern box. That's pretty close. Now, before you do anything, we're gonna have to set two of these points. I'm just gonna let you know in advance. But so to set our first point, now that we've got it positioned properly, go ahead and hit that green check mark, and then go ahead and move to the right here and do that far right leaf tip. And hit the green check mark. Now right here, you can see the next step that it's telling us to do is to roll our quilt. So let's go ahead and just roll our quilt. And I know it's kind of bizarre because you got plenty of space right now, but let's roll it, say, I don't know, 3 or 4 inches or something. Oh, I just realized something. I left a step out for you. We're gonna have to try again. Yeah, let's get it back to where it was, and we're gonna actually have to try again, and I'll explain why here in a second.
It may not be, well, let's see. Okay, well, I can go, don't help me. I don't know exactly where it was.
That's okay. We're gonna remark the points.
Oh, okay. So it's rolled.
Perfect. So let's go ahead and hit the red X button in the bottom right corner, and that's exactly why we're restarting, is because part of this process is you need to actually mark the points that we're selecting. So we need to get like some needles or pins or fabric chalk or pencil or something, and we're going to mark exactly where these points are on the quilt top.
So let's start back now. We've done this row,
Mm-hmm.
and am I going to have to undo stuff?
So what we're going to do now, we're assuming we've already stitched this out. We're going to press the nest icon. We're going to move our machine to the lowest most point on the left of the pattern, and we're not going to press the green check yet. What we're going to do is you're going to mark the quilt top itself with some fabric or a needle or something similar.
Okay, so maybe got a needle, and I put a needle just okay.
And we're going to have to find these points again. That's why we're marking them. So once you mark... Well, hold on real quick. You need to go back to nesting point 1 because you haven't hit the check mark yet. So you need to get right on where that you put that needle. And do you see... Look at your crosshairs. Look at your crosshairs real quick, though. Do you see where they're at?
Down a little bit.
Yep.
So mark with a pin.
So mark with a pin or something where the crosshairs are at, and then after you've marked the quilt top, you press the green check mark. Now, but you see how it says select and mark nesting point 2? Now we're going to move to the right and go to that rightmost leaf. We're going to mark the quilt top. And once we mark the quilt top and we line the crosshairs up exactly where it's been marked, then we'll press the check mark again.
Okay, so I think that's close to where we want it to be.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
And now is where we'll roll the quilt. So let's just roll it 3 or 4 inches. I know it's a marginal amount, but it gets the process across.
Okay. rows?
In theory, yeah.
Okay. All right.
So in theory, what
Now,
we...
let's go back and let's say I'm at the top of my quilt and I have a larger quilt area.
Mm-hmm.
And I was put this design in, say, 3 times,
Mm-hmm.
you know, horizontally.
Sure.
Then can I start nesting at that point?
Right. In fact, let's keep rolling the quilt so that those 2 points that you marked are I want them to still be able to be reached by your quilt machine, but get them fairly close to the top of your take up bar.
Oh,
Because
my pins? Okay.
yeah, because and I know we're kind of in the middle of your quilt, but the concept of this is if you stitched a pattern that's so large that you don't have space to stitch it again, you'll need to roll the already stitched pattern up into the take up bar, and from there you're just going to see like the bottom portion of the pattern that's visible, and that's what we're going to nest into. Does that make sense?
Okay. So I'm up to the take-up rail now. Pretty close. I mean, I never like to be all the way up to it because of
Sure.
the machine. But I'm pretty close. I mean,
And can your quilt machine still get a little bit above those 2 pins?
okay, there's my first nesting point right there.
Okay.
And then I can go, well, I did roll it up a little bit too far, I think.
So let's loosen it up just a bit. Come back like an inch or 2.
Just a second.
You bet.
I think at this point, my fabric is, down on the base of my machine. It's making my machine because I don't have much room there. Okay, so now, erase my pressure foot up here. Now I'm at the lowest point of my first mark.
Okay, so now what we're going to do, here's what I want you to do next. Do you see how it says roll the quilt? We've already rolled. Do you see how it says roll the quilt? We've already rolled the quilt, correct? I'm just confirming with you. I already know the answer is yes, but we rolled the quilt, correct?
So I then hit green check mark?
That's right, exactly. So hit that green check mark and tell me what the next dialog box here says.
It says move the machine to nesting point 1.
Perfect. So now I want you to move your machine to the first nesting point, the one on the far left. And this is just on the quilt top, just where that needle's on the quilt top.
Okay, that's where it's at.
Okay. So if it's on top of that needle exactly where it was when you marked it last time, go ahead and hit the green check mark. Now go to the nesting point 2. Again, right on top of that needle.
Okay.
And then press the green check mark. Now right here is what I want to show you. Okay? In this... Oh, you hit the check mark. You went too fast for me there.
I'm so sorry. Is there any way I can go back?
Well, we're going to have to go back and try it a third time. So you're going to have to unroll the quilt.
Oh, I'm so sorry, Joe.
That's okay. We'll figure this out.
I know what you said. I'm so sorry. Well, good practice, I guess.
That's right.
Okay, let me unroll it. I'm so sorry. I just didn't.
That's okay. We were just at the end, but you know what? If it happened to you, it could happen to anyone. So I'm glad we're covering it.
I don't listen. I don't listen. Okay, let me tighten everything back up. Okay, now, what are we doing?
Okay, so we're going to go back to we're going to unroll our quilt.
I did, and I'm back to the point. Oh, I gotta... Okay.
So we unrolled our quilt so that we've got the 2 needle points that we marked are fairly low, correct?
Okay. Well, I've done something wrong because my crosshairs are a lot higher up than they were. So.
Well, that's because we nested it. When you hit that check mark, you kind of well, you changed some behavior. That's all I'm gonna say. That's the vague way of saying that we did something. But okay. Okay. So
Did we start over?
we're gonna start over. Yep. You can pull those two needles out that you put in, and we're gonna remark them where we want them.
Okay. So, we stitched this design, and it's, well, okay. So now,
So what we're gonna do now is we're gonna hit the nesting icon,
okay, next one. Okay.
and right here we're gonna go to that lowest most point, and we're gonna put the crosshairs there, and we're gonna put a needle down on that point.
Okay. That's going to actually be, that's going to actually be on the area that I've already quilted, so that if I wanted to do this again, okay, well, we're just getting an idea now. Okay.
Okay.
I'm putting it, well, I think I understand this, but I just want to do it. Okay. I've done that. I pinned it and I hit my mark, a check mark.
That's right. So you hit the green check mark. Now you're gonna move to the far right leaf.
Now, what if this was, well, anything, it's just the way to the very last, or the low point of whatever pattern it is, and the very last design, right? I mean, like if I was doing this meandering thing, whatever my lowest point on that meandering would be, the very last one, that's the one I go for, right?
That's correct.
And check mark, all right.
So if you mark that space and then you hit the check mark, and now we're gonna roll our quilt. So go ahead and roll it up so it's fairly close to the take-up bar, maybe an inch or two below it.
Okay. 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 All right. Now we're back in business, I think. Okay. Yeah, I'm about an inch or two. Those marks are right about where I want it, about below the take-up rail.
Perfect. So now since we've already finished rolling our quilt, now we hit the green check mark once.
Okay.
Now we're gonna move the machine to that first nesting point on the left, where the pin's at still. Line it up where that pin's at just perfectly.
Okay.
And then I want you to hit the green check mark. Now you're going to move it to the rightmost pin, so it's lined up just perfectly. Then you're going to hit the green check mark once. And now at this stage, don't hit the green check mark yet. I want to explain what you're looking at real quick. So what we're looking at is the kind of grayed out pattern on top. That represents the position of the already stitched pattern.
Wow.
So what you're going to do is there's two ways to approach this, and we're going to show you both. Don't move the machine yet. I want to show you a way to do it without even touching your machine. So one way we can approach this is you see the 4 buttons on the right. There's the arrow that looks like it's going to the left. There's like an indent button with the nest icon that's in white. Do you see those 2 buttons? And there's the green check and the red X.
Now we're still on the home screen.
Yeah, don't change out of the home screen. I just want you to look on the right. Do you see the back? Like there's an arrow that's pointing to the left. It's just to the left of the green go button. Do you see the arrow? Don't press it, but just tell me if you can see it.
Like you could want to undo something. Is that the button you're talking about?
Exactly. It looks just like the undo button. Don't press it, but yes, that's what it looks like.
It's the very top one above the. Okay, yeah, that's the
Okay. So just below the undo button, do you see the nest icon that has like an indent arrow? So it's white. It's the gray button with the white icon that looks like the nest icon that has the indent arrow.
Yes, it has little hearts in it. Yes.
Perfect. I want you to press that icon,
Okay.
and let's set this to say 2. This is a measurement in inches. And let's hit the green check. So what it's done is, because we put a positive number, again, don't move your quilt machine yet, but like, it automatically spaced 2 inches between this already stitched pattern and the one you're going to stitch on your next row. Now if we were to press that indent icon one more time, and let's put -2. So now what it's done is it's bumped it up into the pattern 2 inches, because that's negative spacing between the two of them. Now obviously -2 was too much in this particular case, but I think that illustrates, the reason I'm bringing this up is, let's say you were going to nest like 14 or 15 of these patterns, or some absurd number, and you wanted to make sure that every row had the exact same spacing when you nested it. That's the feature you would use to do that. You would just manually just go in there and hit that button, and it would automatically space it perfectly every time. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and it will do it every time. I don't need to do that on each row.
Right. So once you put that in, that number will stay there, like basically permanently, until you restart the system.
Yeah.
So let's press it again one more time, and I want you to set it back to 0. Now, there's a second way we can nest this, and that's by just manually grabbing our quilt machine and move the quilt machine around a little bit and see what happens.
Oh. Okay, so like if I didn't necessarily want it to touch like that, I could just kind of like, okay, that's where I want it to start.
Right. So you could move it to the right, you could tuck it up, and that's kind of...
I could even do like this kind of thing.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
that's kind of how you can impact it yourself. The drawback to that is if you're going to do several rows, it's very difficult, it's very challenging to get the spacing just right every time when you do it manually.
Well, sometimes though too, what happens with what's been my experience is, like I say, on the left, and I would nest that and it would look perfect. But then as it went across, I don't know if it has to do with my take-up rail, my headers, or what, but then when I would get over to more the right, it would maybe touch, the design above it, or even overlap it. So how do I avoid that? Just try to give it some space?
Well, the main way to avoid that is just make sure you're using those nesting points as accurately as possible. So the reason why we grab a point on the left and a point on the right is because whenever you advance your quilt, it's going to advance unevenly. One side's going to advance a little bit more or less than the other. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does, because it happens all the time.
Exactly. And so what we're doing by setting those points twice, we set it before we move it and after we move it, well, the computer is calculating the difference, and it's slightly skewing the patterns so that in theory they'll be skewed at the exact same degree that they need to be in order to line up with the already nested pattern. Does that make sense?
Yeah. And all of that, I mean, even though we've gone over it and it gives me an idea, that's covered in the little book here too, right?
Exactly.
Nesting, yeah.
Yeah, everything we've just done step by step is written out in the manual, so you can redo it a couple times. And as you can tell here, I mean, we've done it without stitching anything. It's okay to go through a few times and kind of learn how to do it without stitching first if you need. And there are other ways of nesting. I mean, you could manually nest by just marking and advancing. This is just what's built into the software as another tool to help you get that effect. Okay.
Well, I'm gonna try that here with the rest of my little bear. I may, since I've kind of messed her up anyway. I was doing the mandarin stitch on the inside where she is, and I'm paying attention. I didn't let the mandarin stitch fill the pattern box, so it came off a little bit short of the area. So it's kind of messed up anyway. But I would like to try this, because a lot of my quilts, like I said, I do edge to edge, and I do need the nesting feature. So that would be interesting to fool with.
All right, so let's go ahead and try and tuck it up in there a little bit, and we'll just hit the last. We'll finish this up since we're going to complete what we've done. So try and tuck it up a little bit, or it doesn't have to be tucked necessarily, but I just want to kind of. We've gotten this far, we might as well finish the job, right?
Yeah, yeah. So by tucking, is that what you mean? Leave it like that?
That's fine, yeah. And let's just hit that green check mark. And it says nesting completed for half a second there, and that just lets you know that what you're looking at now is going to stitch out that second row. It's not going to try and move up to where the first one is at now that it's advanced. The computer's adjusted itself to know that this is where it needs to be to stitch the pattern as you just described it, or wanted it to with the nesting feature.
So if I were to hit the go button, it's going to go over here to the left, and it's going to go right underneath what I just did.
Exactly. Yep, that's the concept. So that's how nesting works. I mean, it is. I admit it is a little bit complicated, but that's what the feature that's available. And of course, there's more than one more way to achieve this. But you do get the benefit of the computer doing these kind of calculations for you, as far as the skewing that is involved. So that's a really strong benefit. You also are able to see visually how the two will relate to each other before just running the pattern, and that's a really strong benefit as well.
Definitely. Well, I think for the last little bit of this quilt, and then I have another pattern or two, or panel or two that I don't care to. I mean, I don't want to mess them up, but if I do mess them up, it's okay.
Right.
Because I've got one of the quilts in particular. It will definitely be an edge to edge or a pantograph. Okay. Well, I'm going to try, and if I get into it and I have questions, I can always give you guys a call. That's what's so wonderful about this.
You bet. You can give us a call. I mean, you can check online. You can read your book a little bit. We try to give you as many ways to learn the system and get comfortable with it as possible. So yeah, though, I mean, I think that's pretty much it. I mean, we've covered nesting.
Okay.
All the locks. Now, was this? You got to refresh my memory. I know I've already asked you this before, but was this a machine that we had upgraded with our Perfect Stitch upgrade, where we revamped all your electronics and put a new stitch regulator on it?
Yes.
Okay. So you can see right here at the right, we've got this SPI. That's just controlling your stitches per inch. It's the same as you'll see on the quilting machine dialog, but you can control that straight from here as well if you want. So you just click SPI, punch in your number, and it'll change it directly right here.
Yeah. Now, maintenance of this system and do I turn the tablet off from the little button on the right, or does everything turn off and reset to 0, or empty out all the things like my previous quilt box or quilting area pattern boxes? When I turn all this off, does it delete everything and then restart? Which is fine, that's what I want it to do. But is that what happens?
It is, yeah. So and it's just like you said. There's that power switch on the right edge that you'll just press, and that's how it powers down.
That powers the tablet, and then I manually turn the machine and then the box underneath the frame in that order.
That's right. Mm-hmm.
The machine, and then I guess the whatever mounted here under the frame. Because Terry, we talked about this before, and you told me the way. He said to turn on the box on the frame first, then the machine, but you told me the opposite, so I want to go with what you said.
Yeah, I mean, it really should be the machine is on first, then the black motor box, then the display, and then if you want to go in reverse, you can turn off, the display, then the black motor box, then the machine. That's what I would do. And we haven't had too much trouble with that, but that's kind of the order that we do it here. So.
Okay, well, I can do that. I just want to do it correctly because I want this to have a long life.
You bet. And so another thing, real quick, if you jump over to, I'm going to click over to your quilt machine, Perfect Stitch interface.
Okay, my dog is whining. I'm going to have to let him out. Come here.
No
Come on,
problem.
buddy. 5-month-old Doberman, and he was whining, so he might have needed to go out, and my husband laid down. Go on, go potty. Go potty. Sorry about that.
No, it's okay. No worries.
Okay, now we're at Perfect Stitch, yes.
So I just wanted to point one thing out here about Perfect Stitch. If we go to the folder icon here, and I believe it's under Advanced, do you see this Maintenance button?
Yes.
If we press that, you see how it's got this little clock here that says next maintenance service due in 4.3 hours?
Huh?
I'm going to hit cancel. But what that's doing is your machine is keeping track of how long it's been running. So whenever it's stitching, it's got a little timer that's running, keeping track of how long it's been in active service. And in about 4.3 hours worth of use from now, you are going to get a little message that's going to remind you to oil your system. And then once you get... Go ahead.
It tells and it needs oil. I mean, because Terry said I was over oiling, and that I probably don't need to oil it but every 6 months. But I said, because my book said that came with my machine, it said after every quilting project.
Sure. And for most machines, the average time is every 8 hours worth of use, they need to get oiled again.
Okay.
And
so that makes good. I feel better about that. I didn't like that 6-month thing.
Yeah, for sure. So this is a little timer that's going to let you know kind of when you need to do that. And once it hits that timer, it's going to say, oh, you really need to do your oil. And you put your oil in, and then you can hit reset on this maintenance clock, and it'll reset back to 8 hours. So that's just a little reminder that you're going to get updates letting you know when to oil the machine.
Okay. But you reset it back to 0?
I did not. It's still at what it was.
Okay. It's still at 4.3?
Yeah.
Okay.
But I mean, other than that, I mean, really, I think you're in good shape, Doreen. I'm not really sure what else we should cover, or at this point, I think it's just kind of just keep playing with it.
Yeah, play, and then we're all about that. But I will. I'm going to try that nesting, and I'm going to work on getting. And then at some point, I'm not into it right now, and I don't need it right now. But I will set up a time with you for us to go over doing corners.
Sure.
And there's not this thing because my daughter has called twice from Florida, and I need to call her back. But my whole family's down there. My sister and my 2 nieces and my great niece and nephew. She works for Disney, and they're all down there. So I was going to give her a call back. But at some point when I see that I'm going to have a quilt that's got borders, that I might want to do a corner and attach those together. I'll set up another time with you when it's convenient for you.
Well,
is that okay?
I mean, that's fine. I don't want to spend too much time on this, like you said. You got to run, but I think really I'll just say briefly how that's probably going to work. Is you'll just need to set pattern boxes, one for the corner and one for the border, and we're probably gonna end up using that move start point quite a bit.
Oh.
So what we'll do is we'll stitch out the pattern, the corner block, okay, and then we're gonna grab that pattern and move the pattern by its start point, the border pattern. I mean, move the start point to line up with the end point.
I was going to try to do it on this little book because it does have some corners and all. But it said something about it couldn't set the perimeters or something. And I didn't know how far down to go. Like, I mean, I didn't know how big the corners was or how I needed to, like if I was at the top and I came over the top of the quilt maybe 6 inches and then I come around and set my corner down and, how I didn't know how many inches down and how many inches across and I what I probably didn't do either is I did one and I came down and went across, but I probably didn't set that inside corner perimeter, and that may have been my problem.
Probably, yeah.
At that time I thought I could only do 4 points on a pattern box, but since I've talked to you I found out I can do as many as I need to.
Pretty much, yeah. So I mean, I mean, again, you're more than welcome to give me a call, but I would even encourage you to try and make some pattern boxes and try and see how far you can get.
Sometimes it's better to learn on your own,
Yeah.
I would definitely do that, and if I can't on my own figure it out, in a week or so, I'll give you a call back. I've got a lot going on right now. My son is in the Navy, and his ship has been deployed, and he's coming home this weekend. He's been gone for 7 months.
Oh, wow.
So I'm going to be busy this weekend, but at some point, I'll if I can't figure it out, I'll definitely give you a call back.
Perfect. Sounds great.
Okay, Joe. Well, thanks, and you have a great evening.
Thank you, Doreen. I'll talk with you later.
Okay, bye-bye.
Bye-bye.